Welcome back, everyone. This is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, here with another video. And this comes thanks to Coca-Cola in our Discord channel, who asks if I can go into counter damage a little bit more. And while I thought I had gone into this well enough in previous videos, let's break it down again to make sure we've covered all the bases. Okay? And I feel like the easiest way to do that is to go into a report. Now, this basic report is nice for telling you how you did in combat overall. Did you win? Did you lose? How close was it? So on and so forth. But you can come down a bit further and click this combat log. First, I want to note that I used Raigoro and Adut here. Raigoro has a great counter damage buff, so you can see the difference between counter damage and basic damage in this combat log. Adut has solid skill damage, as well as an increasing attack buff as the fight goes on. So we'll be able to see how attack affects both basic and counter damage in this fight. So let's get into it. First things first, we're going to ignore this first second of combat. I'll explain why later in the video. These are your standard rounds of combat. No skill damage, just you versus the enemy and any buffs that happen to take place during the fight. As you can see here, there's a slight uptick in damage. That is likely due to Adut's attack increase taking effect about 5 seconds after combat has actually started. And that continues on for the rest of the fight. You also have this wonderful amount of skill damage down here. Surely we can see that this is skill damage because it's 7 times that of our normal damage. And if you break that down, you can see that it is. Firepower Assault with a damage factor of 12,000 dealt 36,000 troops worth of damage. And that makes sense, because a standard round of combat is about 2,000 damage factor. If you want to get a general idea of how much skill damage a commander is doing, divide that damage factor by 2,000, and that's how many additional rounds of damage, additional rounds worth of damage that you're doing in a single round. So 12,000 is 6 rounds of combat in a single attack. And please note that I'm also attacking, basic attacking and counter attacking him in the same turn. So that's on top of your normal round of combat. Skill damage is affected by attack power and any boosts in damage. So I'm getting a 16% buff to squad damage here, as well as a 40% increase to infantry squad attack power, and another 8% from her Queen of Arms being in effect. All of these things affect skill damage, and the only thing that's not shown here that affects it is skill damage buffs. And you can see those a lot in ranged commanders, such as Lewis, who has this wonderful 30% skill damage buff. You have Chun, which, right here, increases skill damage by 25%. You also have Carrie, who has the staggered skill damage buff up to 38.5%, if you can manage to have him not use his skill for 11 seconds. Seems pretty dumb to me. But that is a route that you can take. So those are the things that affect skill damage. But basic and counter damage can be a little bit confusing. So let's look at the second round of combat. We still see the infantry squad attack of 40%, which affects both of them. I'll go ahead and say that up front. But here's our first basic attack. It deals 2954 worth of damage, which, if you notice already, is less than half. The reason for that is because Raigoro boosts counter damage. No, right here. Always click on the wrong one. Increases counter damage by 30%. And we can see that reflected if we scroll down just a little bit more and we see this counterattack for 3,500 troops worth of damage. Now, it's not a 30% flat increase here, because we have enough things affecting it that we start to delve into that law of diminishing returns kind of thing. But we can do the math. 3514 divided by 2954 will give us the percentage over 1 that this is a bonus of. And the answer to that is about 1.189, or about 19% increase over the original 2954 damage, which is still pretty substantial. An attack bonus doesn't give us that big of a jump, but a 30% counter damage buff gives us almost a 20% increase to that damage. And to explain why these two different types of attack are inherently different, we can actually look at the first round of combat to see that. If you look here, in the first round of combat, I launched a basic attack on the Corroder for 2956. But you'll look down here. Not only is the Corroder's basic attack missing, but so is my counterattack. That is because basic attacks prompt counterattacks in every single case. There's not one instance in the game that I've seen so far where a basic attack does not prompt a counterattack in kind. Because I targeted this Corroder, he hit me back. But he had not targeted me yet, therefore he did not hit me with a basic attack. So I couldn't counterattack because there was no basic attack to counter. Now, basic attacks are affected by the same things that counterattacks are affected by. Infantry squad attack, any damage buffs that you can get, such as Rygoro's damage buff whenever he's shielded. And of course, you can lower the enemy's enemy's defense or HP to increase the amount of troops worth of damage you're dealing to it. Both basic and counterattacks have those stats that affect them. The only difference in this case is particular skills and talents that specifically state one or the other. An example of this, Elena's 4th skill increases basic attack damage by 30%, and when rage is above 50%, increases it to 53%. That will only affect this number, because it is the basic attack. I put a little bit less stock in basic attack damage because it can only affect one person per round of combat. You can't deal 2 basic attacks with one army because it only affects the enemy that you are targeting in that second. Counterattacks, on the other hand, will counter any basic attack dealt to you. So let's assume, and honestly, we can take a look at a Arena of Doom one for this. If I am in combat against 5 other enemies, I am going to deal my counterattack damage to each one of them. This is not basic attack damage. This is only counterattack damage dealt to them. Which is why you see counterattack buffs on primarily infantry commanders. Rygoro, counter damage of 30%. Thunder, counter damage of 22% when garrisoned. And the king of counterattack damage, Eddie, with a counterattack buff of 44%, on top of another 15% if your remaining squad size is less than 30%. If you can be attacked by up to 10 enemies right now, it's either 8 or 10, and you can deal your counterattack damage to all of them. but you'll only deal 1 instance of basic attack damage. With that, I'm keeping this video fairly short. Hopefully it was informative for you. If you want to have questions like this answered in its own video, please head over to my Discord. The link is in the description below, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you ask. With that being said, this is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, signing off.